What's up, YouTube? It's the Console Samurai with Chronops Gaming, and as you may have heard, there's an interesting petition that was submitted to the White House here in the United States with over 100,000 signatures. This petition is trying to reclassify esports amongst other sports. Now, they're not trying to do this across the board. This is really just directed towards immigration right now. The reason for this is there is an esports player by the name of Leffen, whose country of origin I forget, who was living and competing here in the United States as a Super Smash Brothers player. And he was here on a guest visa, which, once that expired, he was deported back to his home country. This petition is trying to reclassify esports amongst other sports because, according to the petition, he should have been able to get a P1 work visa, which is the same kind of work visa that you would give to a professional baseball player, basketball player, football player, hockey player, whatever. A professional athlete competing and living here in the United States gets a P1 work visa. And that is the point of this petition, that professional esports players should actually be able to get the same privileges. Now, of course, this does raise an interesting question of should esports actually be considered a sport? And you have, of course, two schools of thought of this. One being absolutely not. It's ridiculous. We all know what the sports are. They're all physical activities that you compete in. They require high levels of physical strength, endurance, whatever. And that's not wrong. That's not wrong. We know the traditional sports, baseball, basketball, football, whether it's American football or the football the rest of the world plays that we call soccer here in the States, golf, hockey, tennis, whatever. We know what the traditional sports are, and they are very different than esports. In many respects, they are complete opposites of each other. But then you have the other side of the argument. The other side of the argument says that in all sports, physical sports and esports, it requires several very important things. One, it requires a lot of stamina. To be able to train for the 12 to 16 hours a day that many esports players train for, it does require a lot of stamina. It requires a very deep understanding of the game, and it requires a very deep understanding of strategy in respect to that game. So it does make sense that there are a lot of similarities between, say, basketball and video games. Obviously, one is much more physically active than the other, but there are a lot of parallels. So I do definitely understand, and I in many ways, I do agree that esports should be considered a sport. It is just as competitive, and it has a lot of the same criteria. Now, there's a lot more that I could get into with this, but I'm trying to keep my video short, so I will do a blog post on this as well, and I'll put a link to the blog post down below and in an annotation up above. But it does raise an interesting question as to whether or not this should be a thing. And I do understand why a lot of people are against the whole idea, but as I said, the petition does have over 100,000 signatures. Last time I checked, it had close to 140,000 signatures. And the White House, with it having over 100,000 signatures, now has to respond. And we'll just have to wait and see what they say. But it's interesting that this isn't the first time we've actually seen this argument. And this came up a few years ago when people were trying to get ESPN to actually show the League of Legends championships and trying to show Dota and other esports, competitive esports championships. And ESPN said, no, that's not a real sport, as you'd expect from ESPN. But then on ESPN2, they're showing poker, which is even less active than video games. But I kind of think it's really just based on the stigma of games in general. I think that's really all that is. But what do you think? Do you think esports should be considered or should be considered a game? Do you think that sports are sports, esports are not sports? That is a very clearly defined thing. Either way, let me know what you think in the comments down below. Once again, I am the Console Samurai, and I'll see you around.